in the coming days. For today's agenda, if we can share the slides, we'll have opening remarks from Yuval Laster, Head of Finance, Investment and Global Relations Division at OECD Environment Directorate, followed by a keynote presentation by Dolph Freeland, who's Senior Energy Economist and Hydrogen Lead at the World Bank. After this, we'll have interactive polls with 2 questions for which we'll ask you to answer to, and we will briefly comment the results. Then my colleague Moon-Kyung Lee will moderate a panel discussion and a Q&A. So during this entire hour, please feel free to send directly questions for the panelists in the chat of the meeting. We will convey and relay the question, or please feel free to raise your hands if you want to directly intervene, and we will open the floor for the audience around 2:40 CET. After the panel discussion, we'll have short concluding remarks also to provide the next steps in terms of our activities on hydrogen financing. And as mentioned, we will then keep you posted for the summary notes. With that, I would like to give the floor to Yuval Laster from OECD Environment Directorate for the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph, and good afternoon, everyone from Paris. We're really delighted to have you participating in this workshop on de-risking instruments and international coordination for clean hydrogen in emerging markets and developing economies. It's really a great pleasure to organize this session also jointly with the World Bank and to benefit from the participations of leading experts on clean hydrogen and financing from around the world. So today's workshop is organized by the OECD Clean Energy Finance and Investment Mobilization, the CEFIM team, which works in the development of policies and instruments to scale up finance for renewable energy efficiency, industry decarbonization, and clean hydrogen in emerging markets and developing economies, known as EMDEs. In 2022, the CEFIM team has established a clean hydrogen workstream to support finance and investment across the hydrogen value chain. And over the last year, this team has released 2 reports. The first, a working paper titled Financing Cost Impacts on Cost Competitiveness of Green Hydrogen in Emerging and Developing Economies. And the second, a flagship report titled Scaling Hydrogen Financing for Development, with the World Bank, the Global Infrastructure Facility, and the Hydrogen Council. Clean hydrogen represents a major opportunity for EMDEs. It can help them reduce their greenhouse gas emission across many sectors, increase energy security, and support industrial development with related socioeconomic benefits, such as high-quality job creation. For these reasons, and given their potential to produce cost competitiveness, renewable electricity, many EMDs intend to develop large-scale clean hydrogen projects. To meet the global climate goals of the Paris Agreement, clean hydrogen production must reach 40 million tons by 2030 and 500 million tons by 2050. It is expected that half of clean hydrogen production worldwide, equivalent to 20 million tons per year by 2030, will take place in EMDEs. As there is currently nearly no clean hydrogen production, and it takes several years to develop large-scale projects, action is needed now to secure these financing. Our analysis shows that EMDEs will require approximately 100 billion annual investment from now until 2030 across the value chain, from renewable electricity generation to clean hydrogen production, transport and storage, and end use. Out of this, there is an annual financial gap of around between 10 to 40 billion US dollars. From our work, we have learned that clean hydrogen projects come with higher perceived risk compared to many other low carbon technologies, primarily due to the following key factors: uncertain market demand, a shortage of credible off-takers, price uncertainty, lack of trading markets, political risks, and insufficient infrastructure. These risks, particularly important to EMDs, thereby leading to high financing costs, which significantly impacts the cost competitiveness of clean hydrogen and prevents many projects from reaching final investment decision. Increasing the use of risk mitigation mechanism can therefore play a critical role in mobilizing private capital for clean hydrogen. That is why we're currently preparing the report, leveraging enhanced international coordination and the risking instrument to catalyze investment in clean hydrogen. The paper will build on in-house analysis, investor survey, and case studies to identify priority instrument to mitigate the main risk faced by investors. Today's workshop will provide us with key insights, and we encourage you to share your learnings and experiences on this topic. This report will also contribute to the World Bank's 10 gigawatt initiative to develop lighthouse projects in EMDEs with size ranging from 100 megawatts to 1 gigawatt before 2030. This initiative stems from the World Bank's Hydrogen for Development Partnership, where the OECD co-chairs the workstream on investment financing, business models, and procurement. I would like to thank again all participants from financial institutions, government, private sector, development agencies, and international organizations who will contribute to today's discussion. And now I give the floor to Dolph, who is the hydrogen lead at the World Bank, and he will give you a keynote presentation and present OECD World Bank's collaborative activities in more detail. So I wish us all an insightful and productive discussion, and I'm handing it over to you, Dolph. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yuval, and hello, everyone. First of all, many thanks to the OECD colleagues for the excellent cooperation. You just heard a great overview of all the things we're doing. What I want to do in my opening remarks is to give you a bit more quantitative details on the current state of the market, especially with a focus on the emerging markets and developing countries. And elaborate a little bit on the importance of the financing cost aspect and the need for concerted action to get these first projects to final investment decision. So that's also done where the 10 gigawatt lighthouse initiative comes into play, and what role the multilateral development banks and the development financing institutions can play in this context. If we move to the next slide. So as you've already explained, this is a very capital intensive industry. And we see for the EMDCs alone, a financing need between now and 2030 of around $100 billion per year. And with the purpose then to get to 20 million tons of production by 2030 from that part of the world. This is a very capital-intensive industry, especially for the renewable hydrogen production. So for 1 million ton of green hydrogen production capacity per year, you need around 10 gigawatts electrolyzer capacity, around 20 gigawatts of renewable power generation capacity, and that's an investment volume of around $30 billion. So it means that the total volume is large, but also the volume of individual projects is large. So you may have heard, for example, the NEOM project in Saudi Arabia. That's a project of around 200 kilotons of hydrogen per year. And that's an $8.5 billion investment. So single projects of multi-billion-dollar investments, and that's financing such projects of such size is a challenge. Next one, please. So worldwide, there is between 1,600 and 1,800 hydrogen projects currently under development. And they represent a volume of hydrogen production of around 70 million tons by 2030. But out of these announcements, only a small percentage has reached final investment decision. And here you see the breakdown by region for these 70 million tons. So you see most projects with FID are in the Americas, especially in North America, a few in Europe, a few in Asia, and a few in the Middle East. But for example, Africa has none. And you see that there is an important role for these emerging markets and developing countries, because the overall volume is in these regions is quite significant compared to the total global. So there is a need for action to get more projects to FID. If you take the total projects that have reached FID here from this graph, it's around 5 million tons. To put that in context, today's world hydrogen production is around 100 million tons. So just replacing today's production would require a 20-fold increase of projects with FID. Next one, please. Now, what type of projects are currently under development? It's mainly industrial production type of application, industrial feedstock type of applications. A large chunk is production of ammonia, nearly half of them, but also production of iron and steel, production of methanol, production of synfuels, especially for aviation. So there is an increasing recognition that hydrogen can play an important role in cleaning up these hard to abate sectors, and especially for industry. And the number of projects, again, is very remarkable. So there is a widespread recognition that this can be done. The question is, how can we accelerate it further? Next one, please. And so if you look at the trends in that data set of the project pipeline, then the new announcements, the growth of that project pipeline has in fact declined in recent years. So from 17 billion in new announcements in 22 per month to 9 billion this year. But if you look at the projects that reach FID, actually they have grown over this period. So we've gone from around 500 million per month of projects reaching FID to 3 billion of projects reaching FID. So that is good news. And also the average project size has tripled over this period. So we go to larger projects that are reaching FID. So these are signs of an industry that is maturing. So, but of course, we need to ramp up the volume further to get to these 100 billion per year only for emerging markets and developing countries. Next one, please. So what's the challenge? Of course, high cost of especially renewable hydrogen is a key challenge. And that is a challenge because you need to find an off-taker for that more expensive product. And let's say, policy drivers at this moment are not as reliable as you would like them to be. On the other hand, also, we see that the developing countries suffer a bit from the generous subsidies in the US and Europe. So project developers currently prioritize projects there because they can get significant subsidies. And then the issue of financing costs that we discussed today. If we can reduce financing costs, that can also accelerate then deployment. And then typical issues around an emerging industry. So there is no standard layout of projects yet. The few EPC contractors that can provide a wrap. The projects are still at an early stage. You've seen that, for example, in the recent results from the H2 Global auction, etc. So all these issues require attention, but all these issues can be tackled. This is not new. This is the same as it has been in other industries. Next one, please. And so there is an urgency because these projects do not reach FID overnight. There is a process of initial scoping, pre-feasibility studies, feasibility studies, front-end engineering and design, getting the financing in place, and then construction. So overall time from this initial idea to project commissioning, somewhere between 5 and 8 years typically. So that means for projects that are commissioned, that are operational in 2030, they should have started 2 years ago.
Sto lavorando.
So there is some urgency if we really want to meet all these energy and climate goals. Next one, please. And what do you need for a bankable project? High level, you need 4 things. You need offtake. You need to have a project with financially strong parties on board. You need to have the right enabling environment, and you need to have the physical infrastructure in place to get that product to the markets and to get the resources you need for the production to the projects. So these are the key elements we're looking for when we say what is a project that could reach FID in the coming years. Next one, please. Now, what is happening in terms of support for such projects? If we move to the next one. So there is some funding available for emerging markets and developing countries, but it's only a fraction of the funds that are available for support in the US, in Europe, and to some extent in East Asia. So there is a few billion available in concessional financing and in grants. But as said, if you compare it to the 100 billion of investments needed, it's only a fraction. So we need to be very strategic in the way how we use these resources. There may be some potential to grow it, but it's clear we will not get to this 100 billion level. Next one, please. And that's then where the 10 gigawatt Lighthouse initiative comes in. So we see a need for cooperation and coordination among the MDBs and the development financing institutions to pool the available concessional and grant financing and use it strategically for the first projects and get them to FID. And through that process, develop an confidence with the financing community, crowd in the private sector financing, and show best practice and in developing financing structures to then accelerate deployment of hydrogen. Next one, please. And we've started that process. So we've put together a coalition of these parties, these financing parties. We've started the identification of projects and the characterization of projects. So to allow an evaluation, which projects can reach FID in the coming years and should thus be prioritized. And we will roll this out in the coming months. And then a final slide is around the best practices. So there's a number of platforms currently where best practices are exchanged. We've put one together we call the Hydrogen for Development Partnership, and many of the partners are on the call today. OECD is also a partner and chairing one of the working groups, and so if you're interested, let us know. You can also find more information on the World Bank ESMA website, and that concludes my opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dolf. We will now move to the next item in the agenda today. We will launch a poll. So this poll will cover two key topics that we are currently analyzing at the OECD and that will be included in the forthcoming report. First, risk mitigation instruments that can be deployed to finance clean hydrogen projects in emerging markets and developing economies. And second, the coordination mechanisms that can help accelerate the financing of these projects. So Joanna, if we can launch the polls. Normally all participants should see two questions appearing on their screen. So for the first question, we ask you to select 3 instruments. So please keep it to that with that limit in mind, that you see as an absolute must to help finance a large-scale clean hydrogen projects in emerging markets and developing economies. So we'll leave you a few minutes to answer this first question before moving to the next one. Okay, we have now more than 30 answers. We'll wait a bit and then move to the second question, but I see some people already started answering that one. Okay, so for everybody who already answered the first question, we also have a second one, where here we would ask you to select 2 options among the 6 proposed of what you see as a priority to accelerate clean hydrogen financing and clean hydrogen development through the coordination of financing initiative. So several important words here, I think, coordination and financing. We'll give you still 30 seconds to answer the polls, and then we will show the results. Okay, you will see normally now appearing on your screen the results. So on the first question, and I hope this will provide informative inputs for the panel discussions, we can see that a few instruments clearly stand out in your selection. Offtake guarantee, foreign investment insurance, and political risk insurance, which play a key role in many countries that are endowed with large natural resources to produce clean hydrogen. Technology performance guarantees as well, and foreign currency guarantees. So I trust all these instruments will be discussed in the next hour. Moving to the second question, so scrolling down as well, and you can scroll down on your screen normally to see the results. Here we have much more balanced results. So maybe that shows as well the complexity of defining clear objectives for coordination initiatives. That can also explain why we have a mushrooming of these initiatives and how they can complement each other. That being said, we can still see that the majority of you selected the offering of joint financing of international financing institutions for clean hydrogen projects. So I trust this is also answering the expectation now that there is a lot of enthusiasm on this sector to see actual projects coming off the ground. And the second option that was the most selected is the establishment of an international platform to redirect capital flows. So I think a bit with the same idea of very concrete action. So we have now closed the window. I hope everybody could see the results on the screen, otherwise that it was easy to follow with my comments. And I will now hand over to my colleague Moon Lee to introduce the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for participating in today's workshop again. And we're very delighted to have strong interest from the audience, as well as I'm having experts around the hydrogen project. So I'm expecting it could be very dynamic and interesting discussion for all. My name is Moon Lee. I'm a policy analyst at the OECD, and I'll be moderating today's session on de-risking instruments and international coordination for clean hydrogen in emerging markets and developing countries. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions for the panelists, please ensure that your feedbacks or the questions are shared in the chat box of this session to ask your questions, which will be moderated by my colleagues. And also note that after the discussion, we'll also open the floor to the audience for the Q&A session. When you do so, please introduce yourself by stating your name and institutions you are working for or affiliated with. Make sure to direct your questions to the panel while your microphones and cameras are on. Lastly, please ensure you are staying muted during the discussion, and today's session will be recorded and further shared after the session is concluded. So before we start the discussion, as my colleagues have been highlighted during the introductory remark, we have been working on clean hydrogen since 2022. So we started with looking into market landscape around clean hydrogen projects. And then we further continued on financing the clean hydrogen projects in emerging and developing countries. And during the course of these discussions and work we identified that several risk factors, that is driving up the cost of financing for clean hydrogen projects, which is coming as key barriers for investors to come in the clean hydrogen industry. So to understand the solutions, so today's session is really about understanding how we can tackle those risk factors that we are seeing in the market. So as highlighted, we're working on the paper called Leveraging Enhanced International Coordination and De-risk Instrument to Catalyze Investment, which is expected to be out by end of this year, which will include the risk mitigation instruments, also the international coordination elements, which both segments will be backed by case studies that we're developing at the moment at the OECD. So these components will be further discussed together with the panelists today. And now we have five panelists for today's discussion. Ms. Ana Maria Ruz, who is Executive Director at Green Hydrogen Council, Chilean Economic Development Agency, and Ms. Herin Park, a Vice President, Hydrogen Business Development at ENGIE, and Mr. Garitaj Nahumba, Chief Legal Counsel at the African Legal Support Facility of the African Development Bank. We also have Ms. Mokolo Makara, who is the Manager at Structured Asset Finance and Standard Bank Corporate and Investment Banking. Last but not least, we also have Mr. Jaron Wording, who is Head of Benelux and Nordics at Swiss Re. Please, panelists, ensure your cameras are on, and I would like to start without further ado. Open the floor to each panelist for a brief introductory remark on their works and expertise around clean hydrogen. But please ensure your introductory remark is limited to 3 minutes to ensure we have a sufficient time for in-depth discussion. So let me open the floor first to Ms. Ana Maria Ruz. Ana?
Good morning. My name is Ana Maria Ruz. I'm the Executive Director of the Green Hydrogen Council of Chilean Economic Development Corpo. This is the part of the Ministry of Economy of Chile. The objective of the Green Hydrogen Council is to accelerate the development of the project, Green Hydrogen Project in Chile, and we coordinate public sector in order to give a quick answer to the project that have been announced in Chile. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Ana. Now, Ms. Park.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Herin Park from EMDEs. Absolutely my pleasure to be part of this panel today and excited to discuss currently a very dynamic clean hydrogen industry. ENGIE is a familiar name to a lot of audience in this workshop today. So we're one of the largest, if not the largest, independent power producer globally. We generate about 130 gigawatts of power, of which approximately 30% of the power is renewable sources. And we target to transition to net zero scenario by 2045. So this hydrogen piece is extremely important in our objective of reaching net zero. So my role at ENGIE is to develop hydrogen projects in the Middle East, Asia, and also at the same time, I'm also double-headed as the Chief Financial Officer of Hydrocom, which is a project that was set up in Oman amongst other green initiatives in the Middle East, very well known. We plan to have 4 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity by the end of 2030, which is a very ambitious target. And at the end of the day, we see green hydrogen as one of the most impactful way to transition into net zero economy for a lot of countries in GCC. So once again, it's an extremely exciting opportunity to discuss this with the co-panelists.
Thank you, Ms. Herin. Now let me open the floor to Mr. Gotti.
Hi, everyone. So I'm working with the African Legal Support Facility, which is a facility hosted by the African Development Bank. We provide government support to African governments, and we were involved in the energy sector and other key sectors for the development of African countries. And obviously, with the new sector coming in, we've been involved in a few countries on the continent, including Egypt and Namibia. So very excited to talk about some of the challenges we've seen. We've negotiated a few key agreements in these two countries, and we'd love to share the experience about some of the key challenges that hopefully some of the workshops like this ones can tackle over time.
Thank you. Ms. Makara?
Thank you, Moon. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mokolo Makara. I work for Stanbic Bank, or Standard Bank. We are a South African domiciled commercial bank operating in 20 African countries across the continent, primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. And as Gadidat has mentioned, a lot of our activities in relation to finance are really driven by what the market demand requirements for finance are. A lot of that work would also be predicated by what government policy is in terms of what the energy master plans are or the energy development plans are, of which to date we have seen, in as far as the African continent is concerned, there being significant progress in as far as policy development is concerned in markets like Egypt, Namibia, and South Africa. So I guess those are the three primary markets which we as a commercial institution are observing in as far as how do we facilitate and assist in providing liquidity to develop some of these projects, provided, of course, the typical and normal bankability requirements are met in as far as what makes a project bankable, in as far as technology, feasibility, offtake, and serviceability, in as far as contributing to either the grid. Because I would imagine for the scale of projects anticipated for hydrogen, these would typically be grid connected, unless, of course, the technology develops to such an extent that you can begin to have modular technologies. But I guess it is a phased approach, so one which we are observing quite in a detailed perspective, in as far as what government policy interventions are for hydrogen to develop in respective markets that we operate in. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, Yaron, over to you.
Would it be me, Richard? Sorry. Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Jeroen Wording, representing Swiss Re. I'm heading up for Swiss Re Corporate Solutions, the Benelux and the Nordics. Swiss Re is one, if not the largest reinsurance company in the world, 160 years old. We are an extremely data-rich company due to a function that we protect insurance companies, but also take direct part in risks. And where we probably excel in knowledge is around ensuring natural catastrophes all over the world. Natural catastrophes makes a direct link to the purpose of our company. Our purpose is we make the world more resilient. And the topic of climate change, hence the energy transition in one breath, is since the 70s an agenda item in our company, which is very high on the priority list. Filling in our promise or our ambition to make the world more resilient, we want to support entrepreneurs, governments, etc., developing renewable energy. Given that we are one of the biggest insurer in renewable energy, which is sometimes a complex territory for an insurance company, similar to investment funds or banks, as many risks in this area are unknown. And insurance companies like to look at the past accidents to learn about the risk for the future. If there are none, we need to rely on our own technological insight. Then talking about the development of renewable energy, of which we believe hydrogen will take an important place or be an important building block. We want to sort of support that in every way we can, and we approach the topic holistically. So we do not only, I saw in the first poll question that constructional risks insurance was mentioned, likewise as political risks. But talking about hydrogen, clean hydrogen in developing countries, we believe you need to take a risk approach from start to end. We would like to partner, not be seen as a commodity provider, so protection at a certain price, but partner while developing these the road towards clean hydrogen. And this is why we interact quite strongly with developers, with financiers. And given my position in the Benelux and the Nordics, where you have a very strong economy when it comes to development of renewable energy around the world, my position there is given towards clean hydrogen.
Thank you, Yaron, for the interesting background, and also the panelists for a brief introductory remark. I would like to again remind all the panelists to ensure your interventions and remarks to be point and concise. I will look at each time to ensure that we are having a dynamic yet to ensure we have some time left for the Q&A as well at the end of the session. So let me start the discussion now posing a question to Anna first. Anna, I think when we are talking about clean hydrogen, I think Chile is one of the leading countries regarding providing support, but also facilitating some of the funds, for example, to de-risk clean hydrogen projects, particularly since launch of Chile's ambitious national green hydrogen strategies. The country has launched green hydrogen facility, and also Chile has recently launched 1 billion fund to catalyze private investment and mitigating the risk. So how can financial institutions and project sponsors effectively utilize these resources to reduce the risk associated with clean hydrogen projects?
Well, Chile launched his green hydrogen national strategy on 2020. We are just completing 5 years ago. With the KPI of 25 gigawatt by 2030 of electrolyzer capacity installed or below development. The current administration has launched the action plan 2023-2030 and create a strategic green hydrogen committee. This is a multidisciplinary group of experts, which includes former government ministers. The idea is to achieve a broad consensus for the development of this new industry across the different administrations, giving the investor and the developers of the project the continued support from the state. The $1 billion facility is a sovereign loan to the government of Chile, looks for catalyzing the private investment, mainly through reducing costs and mitigating financial risk, using financial instruments supported by the state. The fundamental principle of the facility is that the state, through Corfo has experience on different financing instruments for other renewable projects, with the case of CSP, for example, in Chile, shares risk inherent to the new industry with investment, and in the way seeks to stimulate investment and the development of a nascent sector, thereby favoring the growth of the country and the sustainable economic and social development of the territories in which productive activities are located. For us, it's very important to this because we are in a social, very strong movement. So we need to be very sensitive with the people, with our society, thinking in this large project with high impact on the territories and in the regions. Corfo will grant credits directly to projects or to financial intermediaries with the aim to transferring the resources delivered by the MDBs. Because the $1 billion have the contribution of four banks, the World Bank with $150 million, IDB with $400 million, and the European banks, European Investment Bank and the KfW with 200 million euros. Also, CAF is also being part of this, and Corfo with our own research complete the $1 billion. The idea of to have a concessional modality with low interest rates and in the long term in order to minimize the financial burden of the project and mitigate the credit risk, being highly flexible in its original structures and conditions, having mechanisms that allow renegotiation or rescheduling in case where it is necessary to do so. We know quite well the risk, technological risk, the social risk, etc., that the first project are going to have ahead. So we need to support them in all this route.
Thank you, Anna. Indeed, I think when it comes to the nascent sector like hydrogen, it is inevitable to have a public support or interventions as well as accompanied by strong political commitments with a clear policy signal to the market. But at the same time, I would also would like to now turn the question to Mr. Gotti, because when we are talking about bankability of clean hydrogen projects, one of the key segment is really about the contract, and the contract itself is coming as a key risk mitigation, for instance, through the wrapped EPC contract or sometimes through the hydrogen purchase agreement that we are currently all looking forward to. Especially, we have seen some of the impacts of PPA in the renewable energy side that it could actually contribute to bring down costs if we standardize the contract in the right manner. So reflecting the AFDB's work through African Legal Support Facility, I know the bank has been engaging on standardizing some of the contract, but in project finance, what will be the really key benefits of standardized contract? Is this a really effective way to manage risk across different companies involved in the clean hydrogen project, given its complexity of project structure?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, it's a very good question, because at the moment there are a few initiatives working on that aspect. From our point of view, standardization and the work around it is a good fact finding, because you get a lot of very smart people looking at some of the key issues for the sector in the potential structure. But I think it's too early to hope for standard contract at this point. I mean, some key aspect of the structure could be standardized, but until we have some more information, or not information, but some certainty about how the offtake will be structured, about the type of projects we're talking about some of the standard specification for the equipment, it will be a little bit hopeful to have a full set of standard contracts that could be applied to different hydrogen projects. However, the work in itself is important, and also it starts to show the different approaches in different countries. So, for example, in Namibia, it's a much more government-supported initiative. At least for one key project, potentially others, where in Egypt it's much more private sector led. That also has some different impact in the contract structure. Obviously, I'm speaking a lot more from the government point of view, and there might be some specific EPC part or aspects that could be standardized. But at the moment, we don't see a high volume enough of transaction, especially FID, as it was mentioned in the keynote presentation. There's no FID on the African continent, and you need to reflect some of the political risk and some of the specificities on the continent. So standard documents will, I think, at some point come, hopefully, if the sector moves further quickly, and you have a little bit more volume per type of offtake approach, especially if you're looking just for export in a different country. But if you do have your offtake in country, it's also a different approach. So many moving pieces. I think the exercise of standardizing is important, but it will only, I think, reap benefit for risk mitigation later. So for the LSF, we're focusing on having the government very, well represented and understanding the complexity of these projects. I think it was mentioned a few times, the volume of investment is so high, it's unprecedented for the African continent. So we need to make sure the government understands the risk, but also understands that it's not necessarily oil and gas project where the revenue stream is going to be obvious and easily identifiable. So it's challenging, but definitely contracts and good contracts are important. Standard contract, I think, will come a lot later in the development cycle or in the maturity curve of the sector.
Thank you. Well, I think it's a nice segue. Gadi's points is a really interesting segue to posing a question to Harry, because I think a green hydrogen project or clean hydrogen projects is what we are observing altogether in the market is initially likely to have less debt capacity than the renewable projects, for example, where these sectors have been established a strong long track records of successful financing and transaction experience has been built among the investors and financiers. Now that brings the really importance on the demand of the equity and supply of the equity for the clean hydrogen projects. So Harin, based on your experience in hydrogen, as well as some of the projects that you have observed in the Middle East, where we see a lot of high volume and big mega projects are announced and discussed, how do you foresee the role of equity investment in mitigating risk associated with the larger scale hydrogen projects?
So the interest, maybe we need to understand the interest from the private sector. Why are private sector investors interested in low carbon hydrogen projects, particularly green? And this is not really a straightforward interest coming from the traditional investment return perspective. So investment in this particular energy segment serves other various qualitative purposes rather than directly say it translates to a monetary return on particular project in short term. But you invest in these projects expecting to have direct and indirect economic impact in your portfolio in long term. So this is not a direct return question. Then what drives these equity investors like ourselves, such as ENGIE, to participate in green hydrogen projects that are very capital intensive? And it could include the company's decarbonization roadmap according to ESG requirements and the company's aspiration to advance in certain new technologies and own the technology. And sometimes it's a need to use hydrogen as feedstock. So you want to have a first mover's advantage in off-taking needs and a strategy to own the expertise and track record in developing a portfolio of hydrogen projects so that you could enjoy your first movers, right? So serving these type of need require strong conviction within your own organization, believing in the fact that the hydrogen economy can actually take off at some point, but facilitated by macroeconomic development in parallel. So that could include government support, technology advancement, closing gaps in other variables. But at the end of the day, investors want to benefit on first movers advantage. And this is also translates to high risk, high return investment. So the risk is really high. And as of this date, this is a very challenging story. Can I get high return out of such high risk that I'm taking? But the good news is that on the other hand, we are witnessing investors that will be in the forefront to take the risk. And for the investors to continue to be engaged in investing, the key is in identifying clearly what the risk profile is and having clear risk mitigation plan to close the gap. Now, this includes risk sharing mechanism between the different sponsors and stakeholders in government. And prior to discussing what type of finance is available in the market, we can talk a little bit about bankability, because there are a lot of different shades of what we perceive as bankability. And of course, this is what drives investors' behavior. So the well-known components of bankability we often mention, also mentioned earlier, are like strong credit ratings from sponsors, offtake, clear public policies, supporting infrastructure. But at the end of the day, being a bankable project is left to risk appetite of each individual investors and how that risk is allocated and shared amongst different stakeholders in that particular project. So a project is still bankable, even if the project is not project financed on 100% non-recourse basis. So sponsors who are more used to and willing to expose themselves to take greater equity risk will also be more comfortable putting higher amount of equity or quasi-equity instrument. Then if not monetary return, then such investors probably seek other types of return in certain form of rights or favor or direct monetary return from the country. And this actually exposes emerging markets and certain developing countries to unquantifiable risks, and the transaction becomes a bit murky. This is something that we need to refrain from happening. So in contrary, there are IPP investors who are more used to power purchase agreements that are traditionally backed and guaranteed by governments and aims to achieve 100% non-recourse project finance. Now, that ensuring all the contracts and terms and conditions and regulations in place to ensure risks are clearly mitigated at this stage for a very nascent industry like green hydrogen is quite unrealistic as of today, but we have to work towards it, right? It's all a working story. So it's the matter of the residual risks that you have hedged the known risk, then the residual risks that are not mitigated, what do you do with them? You've shared amongst these stakeholders or covered by the government or multilateral institutions. And this can be direct government support and funds, insurance covers of subsidies, etc. So we talked about briefly about the principles and key contracts, EPC offtake, etc. It cannot be standardized yet, but a certain framework principles that can be adopted and cascaded to each project as principles can be made available as reference. And together with MDBs, our private sector, governments, financial institutions, and contractors, we need to find ways to strike the right balance in risk allocation. That's where the reality.
Karen, I think you are disrupted. We cannot hear you anymore.
Forming and establishing itself, you end up seeking offtake contracts that are long-term, fixed price, and at the end of the day, it may not be giving you an attractive return. So it allows you to achieve bankability, then your returns are compromised. So you have to strike the right balance. Where do you ramp up to ensure that you actually benefit from first movers initiative is also dependent very much on support from various institutions. So this is what attracts capital in the market. We're all very much in a very difficult position, but it's a collaboration between governments, stakeholders, MDBs, and private sector investors to find the right risk allocation to attract further capital in the market. It's a working story. We're happy to contribute.
Colleagues, please ensure you are muted during the session. We'll open the floor for Q&A later to the participants. So I'll be very appreciated if you can stay muted throughout the interventions. So Heron, I think last part, we were a bit disrupted of your intervention, but I understand that the key points from your end is, this is also somewhat aligned with what we're observing in the market, where basically the equity investor, or we could also see the behavior of the strategy investors are more coming in to take more risk because their risk appetite is slightly different from conventional lenders, for example. And they are playing a critical role in terms of reaching the FID that we are seeing in different parts of the world. With also the government support, and also we are also noting the fact that there is a strong partnership that is sharing each parts of the risk throughout the project structuring. So that's that being said, I want to take a question to put a question to Ms. Makara. Because what we so far discussed is basically large-scale clean hydrogen projects is really often requires security package, including it could be stunts pledge over assets or parent company guarantees. And we also heard strong government support and subsidy, etc. It could be contract. Basically, it should be wrapped around different parts of de-risk instruments to ensure the projects are considered to be commercially viable. So from your perspective and experiences, what are the critical factors that lenders assess to ensure sufficient project viability, particularly in emerging markets with evolving regulatory environment that we're seeing? And also how we can kind of learning lessons from the experiences in renewable energy side and LNG markets that can reflect it on hydrogen project discussion.
No, thank you, Moon. And I think just to borrow from what has been mentioned by the previous speakers, there are nuances. There isn't a one size fits all in how you would look at this, whether it's in emerging market, developing markets, or the African context. I would say historically, from what we have observed within the sub-Saharan African context, is that scale in terms of market size and offtakes and deregulated markets, and as far as energy is concerned, have been a factor which prohibits, I guess, let me say, less bespoke structuring and transactions. Purely because, and I think as has been mentioned, that if you look at the private sector and the public sector, specific markets will take a different approach and the take-up will be different, whether it's from the private or the public sector, depending on one, the technology that is under consideration, in this case, hydrogen, which, as we've discussed, it is not a mature technology, and different applications are considered differently in terms of is there a need as well over and above from an energy perspective? Is there a need for additional feedstock in as far as, let's say, maybe fertilizer is concerned? To the extent that you can start applying multiple applications of hydrogen, then it becomes easier to look at more standardized contracts and terms and conditions against which you can finance. To the extent that you're looking at a single use and a limited market, then I guess your more bespoke and your typical project finance requirements to bankability are going to be required. So I'd say, to answer your question, it's more really market specific in terms of market development, take up, and where the technology development is. Now, the private sector, of course, because you have a lot of high energy intensive users who are private sector led as part of the manufacturing processes, will of course use green hydrogen as an opportunity, of course, to abate their emissions. There's an incentive for them to take up that equity risk because it also is able to be incorporated as part of their energy use, as part of their overall production cycle. Now, if you look at a single user of energy who doesn't have the same use for operation and manufacturing, and as far as abating emissions, it's a different conversation that you're having and a different dynamic in terms of what kind of contractual arrangement you're going to need. So I think there isn't a one size fits all per se, just to answer that question. But to generalize from an African context, I think scale in terms of market demand and size is what's going to prohibit there being more bespoke versus your typical PPA arrangements, purely because if you don't have market depth and scale, it's difficult for even a private sector investor to take an equity view of the market scale and how they're going to be able to recover their investment. I mean, it's similar to what we've seen in LNG as well. A lot of the LNG projects which have been developed across the continent have been led by state utilities or national oil companies. Again, purely because of, you could say regulations in terms of who owns resource, in this case being gas, which is generally owned by national oil or gas companies, who will then partner with private sector players in the form of maybe gas developers to commercialize the resources, and then take a view towards what is used as domestic gas and what is then used for export purposes, which historically, I think the export gas market has tended to be slightly larger than what is used for domestic gas purposes and as far as the African context is concerned. So I think simplistically, without necessarily making it as simple as I'm making it sound, it really is much a factor of how big and deep is the market, how developed is the technology, and who's taking that risk, and how are you able to recover that early investment risk, whether it's from a single user or a more broader, deeper market, which gives you more access and visibility and price discovery for you to be able to recover your investment cost upfront.
Thank you. Now that also linked to the role of insurance products, I want to turn this to Yaron. I know that there has been a lot of also demand and discussion around how the insurance product could be structured more efficiently to address different part of the risk that exist in the hydrogen projects. Because the de-risking hydrogen is really complex, and it also requires more knowledge. And this is the commonality that we hear from each panelist, that we need more understanding and experience that has been built to be broadly to be make the projects more bankable. So in your experience and your observation, how can insurance be tailored or designed to match the maturity and demand of the hydrogen market? And what specific types of insurance, in your point of view, are necessary or available at this point already in the market to address the current risk in the clean hydrogen market or project?
Thank you. Yeah, I was hearing so many good things by my colleague panelist. I stopped writing them down because they didn't fit the page anymore. But there was Jeroen who mentioned also the term residual risks. And obviously here, I think Jeroen even mentioned insurance comes into play, I think, very strongly. Also mentioned that we are on a journey where standardization should help us go through this journey. And we should learn collectively. Partnership was mentioned, collaboration. I think I mentioned that in the opening sentence as well. Now, with that coming a little bit closer to your question, I believe that insurance can play a very important role, not as a commodity to only take over some parts of residual or financial risk, but I think can play a strategic role in the journey that we are collectively on. In your question, I hear the question, can we sort of from the insurance industry come up with a more holistic or package insurance that addresses many risks on the table? I'm not sure if that is necessary. I think falling back on the traditional insurances, and I refer to the poll question number 1, where the construction or risk insurance was mentioned quite prominently, and I believe also got quite a number of supports, even higher the political risks. I think there are well-established, thought through, and relevant insurance products available that can address the different type of risks facing the development of H2. As I mentioned in my opening remark, we believe that we need to take the hydrogen journey, especially in developing regions, holistically, because it is not about a construction or risks insurance for a electrolyzer factory, which is relatively straightforward or can be. But coming to the topics of when in production or when in operation, the transportation and the logistics element, the storage element of hydrogen can become much more complex and faces new risks to the market. The specific nature of the hydrogen molecule leads to risks that we are less familiar with, even though that hydrogen is not completely new. Large-scale use and production, including storage and transportation, for sure gives us a new challenge, and we do not fear, but we need to be learning from. We're talking about green hydrogen or clean hydrogen. I think that is very relevant. So the availability of renewable energy at the locations where hydrogen can be produced is quite critical. We have very, very large experience in the risks attached to the renewable energy development, either it being offshore wind, either it being large-scale solar parks, all coming with different type of risks. And this is quite critical, I think, for the development of clean hydrogen projects. Yet you cannot easily combine them to the insurance of a specific hydrogen project. But the availability of natural resources such as sun or wind is one thing, the availability, and then the asset risks attached to an offshore wind turbine is very specific, including the cable from the windmill to the subsea stations, etc., etc., etc. So there are many different risks facing us while taking this journey towards the development of clean hydrogen. And again, I believe that the insurance industry can play a strategic role in this journey and should. But if the question was, can we become more easy accessible by providing overall insurance solutions to a project? We are very open to discuss everything, but I think we should question if that is necessary. So breaking up the different elements of the risks attached to that can also lead to specific knowledge in those territories. Again, storage and logistics, but also the supply chain while developing hydrogen installations. What I want to state specifically is that the insurance industry, and I need to speak for Swiss Re, is committed to take on this energy transition journey, even though it comes with new risks, unknown risks maybe. But it's also for the insurance industry to some extent a learning curve, for which we are not afraid, but we need to rely on our technical expertise to be able to judge that specific elements. I think it was here in mentioning that and there are high risks, and investors should then also connect that with high returns. This is not so much the game of the insurance industry, and certainly not of Swiss Re. We are more committed out of the purpose to support the world, to make the world more resilient. Why? Because again, the natural catastrophe element created by the burning of fossil fuels is causing the global economy to pay a lot of money on natural catastrophes. So yes, the insurance industry, Swiss Re, is committed to support this journey, to take over residual risks, not for high returns. It's more out of ideological reasons. It's maybe a bit too strong to say it like that. But the reasons are they are purpose driven. Maybe a long and complicated answer in the hope it was an answer to your question.
Yes, indeed. So I think it's an important point, which is quite aligned with the key underlined messages that we are hearing from different panelists today. Basically, we are understanding the hydrogen take-up is very important, and there is a lot of knowledge that we are here witnessing to address risk allocation, and also how to structuring the right project, and how to strike a balance between the making revenues and also as well as optimizing the social benefits that associate with hydrogen projects. But also, like, for insurance perspective, as you just mentioned, I think for now I see the insurance industry's experience particularly from the renewables and also the recent climate change related products that has launched. I think this kind of engineering based policies, including that could cover this construction or for example, weather related risk that linked to hydrogen production could be handled, and because it's ready products and the experience has been accumulated. But going forward, as understanding toward the structuring and risk factors around hydrogen, we need to also try to put efforts around sophisticating those products going forward. So it's quite aligned with also the financial instruments, these risk instrument, as well as how we can maturing the policy support from the government side, as well as the contractual components, how much in detail we can standardize it. So I think we are kind of seeing the commonality of the key messages from the panelists. So now, let me open the floor for Q&A to the participant. I will first want to start with the questions that we received from the Q&A box from the Mark, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I will just invite him to maybe put his camera and microphone on and addressing his questions to the panelists directly, if he's...
Yes, thank you. I just introduce myself very, very briefly. My name is Mark Halewood. I work for in the field of chemical process safety for a regulator in Southwest Germany. I'm also one of the vice chairs of the OECD Working Party on Chemical Accidents, which will give you some idea of why this particular question was posed, because some of these installations are high risk for the people who work there and for the surrounding communities. This is hydrogen, or it could be ammonia. And these are risks. If this fails, it could kill people, could damage the environment, and it could damage the economy as well of the community in which this is sited, or even the country. If you're investing in a 20 gigawatt hydrogen plant, you're not going to get a second one. And the other risk, which is of particular interest, is that of environmental justice, or better said, environmental injustice. To produce hydrogen, you need ultra pure water and a large amount of electricity. In some of the developing economies, these are two things which don't exist. How do we make sure that we address those risks, which are societal risks, as well as the financial risks when some of these new ambitious projects are being established? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Indeed, quite an interesting questions. Perhaps any panelists first have an interest to address these questions?
I could answer in some way from our experience. For us, is what you mentioned is very important. And in that sense, the facility, it's an opportunity for us, because as the multilateral development bank are behind the funds, they have safeguards that are more important than the local regulation that we have. So for applying to the facility, the projects need to accomplish the safeguards of the multilateral development bank. We have been at work in order to have a minimum common of the safeguard that each bank have for the projects. Also, we are upgrading our national regulations in environmental issues. It's not easy, and talking about the issues of water, for example, you know, in Chile, we have two areas that are important for developing the green hydrogen project. One is in the north, in the Atacama Desert. So in that place is located the copper mining. So the population is used to large industrial installation, and the water comes from the desalination plant. Does not mean that there are also environmental issues there, but the situation is absolutely different in Magallanes region. In Magallanes region, there's no experience, the population has not, the society has not experience concerning the environmental or large industrial development. Also in Magallanes, we have few levels of water. Magallanes is a region that has been impacted by the climate change. So we have drought also in Magallanes. So we have been working with hydrology studies, baseline, and looking for new solutions, not just desalination for having water there. So looking for other solutions that could be based in the natural. So we're working on that, and you can believe me, it's a very hard work that for us as the government, as part of the public sector, it's very, very important. It's so also for us, it's important to have local demand, not just exporting this large quantity of green hydrogen or green ammonia to Europe or to Asia. For us to have the opportunities to create jobs and to create better conditions for the society, for the population there, with high impact that these large projects have in the territory is very important. And our ministers and our government is working on that.
Thank you, Anna. Indeed, social acceptance and also environmental risk is a key factor reflecting some of the experience and what we have seen in the market, starting from the renewables to the LNG, there has been a key risk related to specifically on the environmental risk as well as social acceptance that eventually make the projects default or sometimes put at the risk of postponing. So it's a one direct impact, but also beyond that, it's also hazard to us basically as all if we don't treat this risk seriously. But I see the Gadi also raise hands. So if I ask Gadi to also intervene.
No, thank you. And I think it's just to complete what Anna was saying, because she hit all the good points. But just to put a bit of perspective, I mean, ammonia is a product that is handled already quite significantly across the world, and it's not and there are some very valid concerns, but definitely these can be mitigated, and MDBs and government need to be aware of them, but they're not unsurmountable challenges. But with respect to the electrical demand and the water, what we're seeing as the LSF so far, it's actually a vector of potential new sources of energy and water. So both in Namibia and Egypt, water desalination is going to be the solution for the water, and it's intended to not only be used for green hydrogen but also for agriculture in both countries. In addition, both of these maybe, and I don't want to get too technical, but both of these approach are wind and renewable, and wind and renewable will have surplus of electricity because you have to match the curve of your electrolyzer. And so in both cases, there are significant potential for very cheap surplus of electricity to be incorporated into the grid. And I think my colleague from South Africa, Fokolo, can also speak to that. But one of the countries in the region could benefit the full Southern African region, because that surplus can be used in the power pool. So it's more actually a potential of additional electricity and water than displacing it. And the European guidelines are very specific about when the production of electricity or the power plants need to be built. And I think it's 3 years before the production of green hydrogen. So we're not talking about using existing power plants, but it has to be constructed if you want to fit some of the key carbon tax regulation. So, and the last point on this as well, is it's also because the question is how. So government and MDB's role to make sure that these projects will be benefiting the local population. So definitely the private sector has a role to play, but I think the initiative needs to come from our organizations and governments.
Thank you. Heron, you raised your hand.
Yeah. I want to, sorry, is it me or you?
I know the enthusiasm, but let me start with the Heron just in order, and then I will hand it over to Yaron as well.
I'll make it short. So these are actually questions we ask every day as project developers, and also it's actually quite strongly linked to bankability. For example, HSSE policies of each sponsors are very serious matter. We have to internally pass our health, safety, security, environment procedures in order to proceed every phase gate of investment decision. One thing. The second thing is it's the same thing with the lenders. Lenders have very strong requirements for ESIA reports these days, and these due diligence take a very long time. It's a 3-4 years of procedure to actually go through these due diligence. And during this process, these are definitely flagged as major risks and hedged. And a lot of investments go into it. Having said that, apart from the private sector lender perspective, what's interesting about Middle East, and I find it very useful to the governments, is that there's a strong request from the government in the RFPs and tenders to ensure localization of these projects, meaning that I have to ensure using a form of CSR or part of my investment for the society to benefit from the project. And I think this is an important aspect of hydrogen projects. It impacts the economy of the region greatly. It creates jobs. It creates industries that are cascaded from hydrogen. So for example, the Dukun project, which we're working on, we've got about 6 projects in one region, and you could say, yes, it's a high risk in terms of environmental, social issues, and there are people living in the desert, there are vegetation in the desert, there are reservation areas. However, what we do as developers all together and discuss with the government is how do we make sure the indigenous people who are not aware of these industry, get educated and also take a part in the economy. So it creates a new type of economy, and they're employed, and they're also enjoy from the economic development. And I think governments making this as a type of a requirement is also important. And does it burden private sector investors? It does. It's a challenge. But I think it's necessary for sure. And what we're doing as an economic developers is that to contribute to making this economy work. And it's not just for straightforward financial investment, right? So these are collaborations, partnerships that need to be fostered and addressed by the government and pushed by the government. And of course, private sectors will respond to this if you make that a requirement. And even if it was voluntary, a lot of private sector investors take CSR very seriously. So hydrogen projects are one of the best instruments to develop a country.
Thank you. I have so many questions I want to ask personally, but I have to give the floor to Yaron. But I would be appreciated to make your intervention quite concise because we have a lot of questions that we are receiving to address.
I will be very short, but I like Mark's question so much, but no surprise. But yeah, so yes, consequences of when things go wrong in the hydrogen industry can be very big. But similar to your industry, Mark, the chemical industry, failure over there can be disastrous consequences. Same in the oil and gas, and we have had many examples in the past of that. And hydrogen comes with specific risks, but we have learned to deal with it in the LNG risks as well in the 50s of the last century. So I believe we can do it, but we need to do it smart and from a technical approach. And we are professional risk takers as insurance industry. And this is one of the last questions I saw coming in. But we want to do that, and we need to do that in a sustainable way because we need to respond to all our stakeholders at the end of the day. And these are our insureds and society, that we are not seeking extreme high returns. We need to be sustainable as a company. And the last, I wanted to mention that I believe that research into using seawater even to produce hydrogen are also well underway.
Thank you. Okay, so we also have a question from Eric at the BCG. So his question is, according to survey, the showing IRR expectation is around 7 to 9%, sometimes even lower. Is that enough according to panelists or financiers insurance to step in? So this is the question, and I understand the smiling faces, but let me maybe turn this question to Ms. Makar. I think she could start addressing this question first, and then I can turn it to other panelists.
So I think the question of IRR really depends on what your capital structure is, and a function of where the market that you are operating that project is. So those single digit numbers, in as far as our experience is concerned, have been in developed markets, and not developed markets in the form of, I guess, how we understand them as your larger economies, but a market where there's a market, there's demand, it's been existing for a long time, and therefore you've got visibility on what your offtake is or what your demand is, for argument's sake, and how you can then price up for that. Now, for earlier technologies and for developing markets in the sense that they're still being proven, I would think anything lower than the mid-teens from a financial return perspective might not be acceptable to developers from at least what we've observed. So I don't think it's a question of necessarily what is acceptable in terms of returns. It really is a question of, you understand the market, you understand the risks, and if those IRRs play out, are you comfortable with them playing out in terms of what could potentially go wrong over the life cycle of a particular project? But given where hydrogen is today, my personal view would be that, I don't know, single-digit levels could possibly be a bit low, given where the market currently is.
Indeed, I think sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, I agree with you. I think we are all searching for the right spot, or sweet spot, we call it, to understand what will be the expected return out of these projects. But at the end of the day, I think we really depends on geography, as well as how the project is structured per involved stakeholders, as well as interest, what's the end user of these projects, etc. So I think it's quite a bit of a complicated dynamics. But let's also open the floor to Herin, based on her project experiences, etc. So if you can also address this question on her view.
Me, okay. At the moment, I think every investor has a bit of a different expectations of what that return means. It's like I said earlier, it's not necessarily always numeric return. So it's actually the strategic initiatives sometimes that drive these investments. So it's very difficult to put a number on a qualitative return. Within the investors, organization, which is built different from one another, and we're not funds per se, if you're an industrial developer, and your returns are not necessarily it's quite possible where your returns are not necessarily coming from the project itself. You also have to understand that the intent to invest comes from intertwined interests that may be translated into indirect return. So how do you calculate that in terms of project IRR or equity IRR is actually one of the biggest questions all investors have and justify within themselves. So I don't know how these surveys are done. I don't know where the number comes from. Maybe certain, say, government institutions or sovereign wealth funds could have lower expectations. I can understand. But these are governments who are investing in their own country for the development of the economy. So their intent is still there. So that's why I'm saying is that as of today, we shouldn't really be confused or set up a certain anticipation on these returns. We're in the stage of defining what we want, as much as we're in the stage of defining those risks. So like I said earlier, we're at a very early stage, and we should be able to define this through partnerships and collaborations and dialogues like we're having today. And of course, we won't be able to disclose what each private institutions are expecting. However, I want to raise the point that everybody has different intentions in these projects, and what they get out of is a private question. So I'm not sure as of today if we can put a price tag on a project. That's my feeler.
Yes. Well, we have another questions, and I see Miss or Mr. Apologies, but Deepak Agarwala posed questions around the certification and standard. And if you are still there, would you please turn on your microphone, perhaps, to pose question directly?
Yeah, hi, good evening. This is Deepak here. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so we are one of the integrated energy developers based in India. And we are planning a fully integrated project right from renewable energy to green hydrogen, green ammonia, and storage facilities. So one of the hurdles that we are clearly seeing in the international markets is the different definitions on the carbon intensity, and that being one of the very important evaluating criteria apart from the price. So as you know, India is adopting 100% green, but many of the developed markets where we plan to export, many of them are having, divergent standards on carbon intensity. And so does the evaluation process, which is becoming more complicated due to the blue molecule. So is the World Bank or AMIGA thinking of any unification of the certification standards, so as to ensure that the molecule from emerging markets become more bankable for the developed market?
Thank you. Any panelists who would like to give it a try? Yaron, is it old hand or you raised the hand for this question? I'm assuming it was old. Hello?
Hand. It was an old hand, sorry.
It was old hand, no problem. Maybe then I would like to ask Mr. Gotti to perhaps give it a go on these questions.
Yeah, I'm not an expert of certification, but what I can discuss is definitely the need that we recognize globally, the fact that to use initially the best resources is key. Obviously, the capex, the financing costs are something we can work as an industry on reducing and optimizing, and some of the key financial product like the insurance or what the MDBs can provide will help reducing the financing cost, and hopefully the technology curve will take care of some of the capex. But if you start building infrastructure in countries that have less optimal resources, it's going to be very hard to then start to steer the industry towards the best resources, because you'll have already invested significantly in some of the key infrastructure. So certification can definitely be a tool to make sure that policy-wise we favor projects that are based where the natural resources are the most optimal, and it's very clear, at least in the discussion I'm part of, that it's not about developing Africa, although this is a key vector of growth if correctly structured. But it's about global transitioning, and for that you need the best resources, and the best resources are on the African continent. And obviously, as African governments and countries try to embark in that journey, they need to do it to make sure that they benefit from it. But ultimately, if we don't use the best resources, we're going to sink a significant investment in less optimal jurisdiction, and ultimately you cannot improve your natural resources. So when capex will be improved, financing costs will be improved, you're still going to remain with less optimal natural resources, which is an issue, I believe. So certification should be a tool for that, and you need a global initiative to not create a very different regime across regions.
Thank you. I see the hand from Aldo, and then I will turn to Dolph as well. Aldo, floor is yours. If you, I see your hands raised.
Sorry, it was a mistake. Hello to everybody.
Okay. Dolph?
Yeah, let me try to come back to this point of standards and certification. So that's a topic where we get a lot of questions from countries, especially countries that are looking into exports. There is a lot of standards and certifications in existence. There was an for example, last year, I think a report from IRENA and RMI that gave a nice overview. They are at the moment not consistent. There has been, that is recognized as an issue. IPHE has done an effort to develop a uniform methodology how to account for greenhouse gas emissions. And that the idea is to develop together with ISO a standard on this. But the issue of developing let's say, uniform global threshold levels is a very different one. And I would say my impression is that we're more moving into agreements between individual parties than to a global uniform system in the coming years. And so for the time being, you have to deal then with the standards as they are applied in the markets in which you want to deliver. And there are still some questions how to interpret some of that. And we see it now at the moment, especially around the existing European standards and what that means if you want to deploy them in emerging markets and developing countries. So that could be a topic to elaborate further on these details. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolf. Before we have a final question that posed on the panelists regards to specifically, because today's discussion really highlighted the also importance of international coordination and support. But I would like to pose one last question before we get to that question, which is around the offtake risk. So today's survey, we have noticed that the results shows offtake risk is significant and it has to be addressed as a priority. And this is what we found also last year's study that we had done with World Bank colleagues, that one of the highest risk factors that is coming as a barrier for reaching the FID for clean hydrogen projects in many parts of the world is also the offtake risk. So I would like to give each panelist just 1 or 2 minutes of their thoughts on how we can address this offtake risk. I understand it is challenging. It's relevant to many different segments of the market. It's relevant to the market development of the hydrogen, traded prices emergence, and also how we can create the volume, etc. So it's a very complicated topic, but I would ask each panelist to provide their own view on this, as this is one of the key priorities from our audience, as well as the findings from our studies and something we see in the market as well. So I will start with maybe Anna.
It really is an issue of the off-takers, international off-takers. So in Chile, from our experience, we are working to increase the local demand first, and then to deal with the international off-takers. But to have not have off-taker is an issue of the cost of the final product, from my point of view. And if we think that the 50 or 60% of the cost of the green hydrogen is the cost of electricity, we have been working in having a low cost of electricity in Chile, just not the cost of the electron, it's also the cost of the transmission of the electricity to the production plant. Also, we have been working in the value chain of the project. I mean, we have an open call of manufacturers that could be interested in installing in Chile the fabrication of the electrolyzers in order to decrease the cost of the electrolyzer, but also decrease the delivery time of the electrolyzer for the project. If you think that in Chile we have announced a project by 40 gigawatt, that 15 gigawatt in Antofagasta region and 25 gigawatt in Magallanes region. That is not so probably that all those projects have at the end been running. But we think that 12 gigawatt is a conservative number of the demand of electrolyzers that we are going to have in Chile. Nevertheless, from all these projects, just two projects have presented the papers to the environmental impact assessment office agency. So,
thank you. Anna, I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but we have a final question last to close the session.
Okay.
So let me just give a floor to other panelists. But this is the interesting point, and perhaps we can include in the summary after the discussion your points to ensure that we can also disseminate some of your points to our audience as well as for our future report. So let me hand it over to Ms. Park for her quick thoughts on the offtake risk.
Yeah, so we often talk when we talk about offtake risk in terms of bankability, then we often say, okay, it's a price or terms and conditions that govern that offtake risk, right? Because and then you say the standard answer will be, I need a fixed price, long-term take or pay arrangement, 15, 20 years to make the project just bankable. And then this is obviously reflected in, subsidy schemes like Korean CHPS or Japanese CFD or HD Global. And it's at the moment, because the industry is so nascent, we get a bit, of course, we want to close that risk gap. So that's why we are dependent on these contracts. But if you look into one level deeper and think about why, then it's because these end uses are not yet mature. Because at the end of the day, whoever is taking this as an offtake, they need to use it at the end use. And at the end of the day, the end use feasibilities are ongoing, right? So if you're looking at CHPS market in Korea, they're running feasibilities to see if co-firing actually economically makes sense. They can't give you an answer today if you're a Genco in Korea and say, this is feasible at what price? That's why they cannot commit to it. And then you've got somebody like, bunkering project. They're not quite sure how much they can actually sell their end product to. So they cannot commit to a price. So that's why you end up having these subsidy schemes provided by the government to close the gap and make sure the projects are bankable. Now, having said that, maybe you can have a bankable project, but from a project developer's perspective, I'm compromising my market value in 20, 30 years by doing that. So it's a strategic choice and risk allocation I should have in my offtake portfolio. How much of what percentage of my offtake portfolio would have a long-term contract at a fixed price? How much am I going to take risk to leave it open for market later? It's a very, very tough question everybody has to answer. But this also comes back to the table on the previous question of what kind of returns are you looking at, right? So that's your risk appetite, and that's your choice as a developer to settle with a lower return but a very stable project that's bankable, or you want to take a higher risk and deal with the market risk. So these are the questions as of today not answered, but that's particular to the investor.
Thank you.
I don't know if it addresses the question, but that's how I feel.
Thanks. And Ms. Makara?
Thank you. I think without repeating what has already been said, Anna put it very simplistically. How big is your market in terms of activity to sell? How far is your logistics from production to end use? And what is the capital cost required then to bring all that together? And really, it's really about, what are the costs to cover all those? And the higher the capital costs, I guess the more significant offtake becomes. And I think, let's not lose the focus of typically project finance is centered around single asset, single source of revenues. And because you don't have a diversity in market, that's typically why offtake agreements are required. But if you've got a deep and active market, and as this technology develops, then the need for explicit offtakes will reduce because you'll have a more active market.
Thank you. Mr. Gadi?
I'll be very brief, but because I think everything was said on that topic. But I think just to put emphasis on what Erin said, For us, the way we're seeing it is every off-taker is very scared that they will get into an off-take agreement, which very quickly will put them in a position to be inefficient, or at least not as competitive, because the first off-take agreements will have a price that everybody knows will become uncompetitive very quickly. That's the bet on the industry, is that the technology will optimize very, very quickly. So I think that's the issue, and we can focus on the return, we can focus on the financial costs, but the reality is it's an offtake problem. Is the offtake will be initially very uncompetitive, and because of that you need either subsidies or government support to ensure that that cost will ultimately be shared across either a full regional market or the world, if possible.
Thank you. Last to Yaron.
Yeah, so much has been said. So let me be very simplistic. It's the chicken and the egg. Once demand increases, supply will become more economically. I believe there are so many things happening on so many sides that that demand will increase. Hence, an economic supply will origin. And it's a journey with many risks, many unknowns. But I think if we all hold hands and partner up, I think we can undertake that journey.
Thank you. So I would like to ask each panelist conclude today's session with 30 seconds of response to my final question, which is around what key actions can policymakers take to improve coordination and support the market adoption of hydrogen, and how we can really enhance the international cooperation to make the hydrogen projects happen. So let's start with from the backward. Yaron, you said something already, but
let me, from my profession, then focus on uniform safety regulations.
Okay, Mr. Gatti.
I would say that if we can have a very good framework for carbon taxes across the world, with these revenues used for the support of the offtake agreements, we'll get there. I really think the focus is on that end.
Thank you. Ms. Makar?
So I would say long-term comprehensive energy master plans, because that allows you to then take a view today and the long-term investment cycle, but then also complemented by periodic being whatever frequency is applicable to a particular market, updates on the market demand analysis to give real-time information over the long-term investment periods.
Thank you. Ms. Herron?
I would say what we need most as of today is very transparent interaction between different governments, policymakers, and private sector investors to understand where the challenges really are and reflect that into clear policy and regulations that are adopted in projects.
Thank you. Now, Anna?
For us, it has been very important to work below Hydrogen for Development Initiative as a way for sharing best practices and know what is happening in terms of financing and advancing of the international projects.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for such engaging and insightful discussion today. I would like to extend special thank you to our distinguished panelists, but also active participation from our participant in the webinar to discuss and share their expertise and perspectives on the challenges and opportunities in the hydrogen industry. Before we close, I would like to remind you that recording of today's webinar will be available shortly, and we will be also sharing a summary of the key takeaways. So please keep an eye on your inboxes for further updates. If you have any additional comments or questions, please feel free to reach out to us after the session. Now, let me hand it over to my colleague Joseph to wrap up today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moon, and thanks to all participants of today's meeting, including as well all the speakers. So Yuval, Dov, the 5 panelists, Moon for moderating the event. I think this was a very dynamic discussion. I'd also like to thank our colleague Joanna for supporting the entire organization, of the event, and she will probably be the one communicating the summary notes, recording, and additional information on the event. To summarize in a nutshell today's discussion, I think today's event confirms that there is a lot of enthusiasm for clean hydrogen development. That being said, there are still a lot of difficulties to identify bankable large-scale hydrogen projects, especially in emerging market and developing economies, as these projects come with very high risk. So what do we need? I think first, many enabling conditions were mentioned, including taking into account environmental, social, governance criteria, having proper certifications and standards, managing safety. So many non-financial conditions. Then we also need economic incentives, notably provided by governments, as well as a number of de-risking measures, which can include contracts, but can also include a number of risk mitigation instruments. So this was also the purpose of the first poll, and this showed that offtake guarantees, political insurance, technical guarantees are much needed in order to help projects reach final investment decision. And following this, we also need, of course, to address how the projects can be financed, so what will be the financing structure of the projects, how collaboration can take into account the risk appetite of each investor, and how further collaboration can be beneficial to accelerate investments. And this was also what the second poll showed. Basically, collaboration is needed across a wide range of actions, and especially towards very concrete financing. We hope that our forthcoming report that will come out by the end of the year will provide insights on two key areas: de-risking instruments and coordination of financing initiative. That it will also inform the World Bank's 10 gigawatt initiatives that Dolph presented in the keynote presentation. And I will just end my remarks by saying that we will circulate a draft of this report in the summer with a few experts for review. We hope to have it published by the end of the year, and we thank you again for joining the event, for all your insights, and for the comments you may do in the coming months when reviewing the reports. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.